their greatest journey ever thanks to a simple game of hide and seek. Young readers will be anxious to turn the pages in order to find out what happens next in this intriguing adventure. The three of them, James, his sister Sally, and Mark, their BFF, were bored. They had been playing all day, but now that it was dark and hard to see, they were bored. Due to their inability to see the ball, they were unable to play football. It was a lovely spring night and they appreciated being outside, especially after having to play games inside all winter. They didn't want to go inside and play a game. It was simply too early for them to go home, and they were at a loss for what to do. Mark responded, "I guess I'll just go home," in a dejected tone. "Aw, come on," James retorted. "There's still time for one more game of something," Sally then announced. James said, "I was just going to say that." "Yeah, I'll bet," his sister answered. "You always claim to be thinking about anything I was thinking," she remarked angrily. James exclaimed in a yell, "Do not!" "Do too!" Sally screamed. Mark did little more than shake his head side to side and look down at the ground. He murmured to himself, "They're at it again." "Okay, let's play hide and seek," he shouted next. "I will be the one looking." He made a U-turn, stood in front of a large tree, closed his eyes, and began counting aloud. 199, 98, 97. Sally and Mark put an end to their argument, exchanged glances, and then split apart in search of a hiding place. Mark could still be heard counting out loud in the distance. 4, 3, 2, 1. Here I am, prepared or not. Then he turned and started hunting for possible hiding spots for them. It was simple to find Sally, so that she would be near base, the secure location to reach before being tagged. She always went off, circled about, and then returned. Mark scanned the area for the largest tree before sprinting there. She wasn't there, though. He thought to himself, "I'll bet she's behind that big bush." He then raced over to it and prepared to tag her, but she was nowhere to be seen. Turning back, he spotted James sprinting in the direction of base and sprinted after him. James tagged the base just as his shoulder met his and shouted, "Safe!" "Have you received Sally yet?" James queried. "No," Mark replied. "It's getting late and we need to go home, so I haven't been able to find her." As a result, both lads yelled, "Come on out, Sally, it's late!" However, nobody responded. There was not even a faint chuckle coming from the shadows. Again they yelled, "Come on out, Sally, it's getting late!" Sally continued to remain silent. They became concerned and began looking for her. They yelled, "Sally, come on, we give up, you're safe," as they circled the area. But regardless of where they looked or how loudly they cried out, "What had happened?" Sally questioned. All she could recall was hiding by crawling behind a large tree that had fallen. She could now see a few stars through a tiny hole above her head as she glanced upward. She had crawled under the tree trunk and gotten stuck in a hole. She shouted, "Help!" and heard her voice reverberate throughout what appeared to be a cave. "Help! Help! Help! Help!" "James, did you hear that?" "Mark!" he exclaimed. Sally just shouted for assistance. James yelled, "Sally, keep screaming! That way we can find you." Sally continued to cry after hearing her brother. The boys eventually arrived next to the large tree trunk. "Hey!" James questioned. "Are you stranded under this tree?" "Kind of," shouted Sally. "I fell into a cave when I crawled under it to conceal. Please, I need your help. I'm trapped inside since it's dark." "James, you stay with Sally, and I'll go get my dad," Mark said. Then he sprinted into the night. "Don't be frightened," James advised. "I am here with you right now," Sally cried. "No, you're not," inconsolably. "I'm down here and you're up there." Sally knocked against something as she turned in the cave's pitch blackness, screamed, and started to cry. "What's wrong?" you ask. James shouted. Sally answered in a trembling voice. "There's something down here with me." Mark and his father suddenly burst out of the woods running. Sally's safety was inquired about by Mark's father, who was seated. He heard her screaming and crying. He inquired, "Sally, are you hurt?" "No," she answered, "but something is with me down here and I'm afraid." "Sally, step back. I'm lowering a rope and will be down there with you shortly." The father of Mark fastened the rope to the tree, located the opening beneath the trunk, wriggled a little, and descended into the cave. Sally stopped sobbing as she saw him descending the rope. He wasn't just there. The illumination of the cave's walls and floor was increased by the beam of his torch. He focused the light on Sally as he approached the cave's floor and gave her a bear embrace. "Don't be alarmed," he advised. "I'll get you out of here quickly." He turned on the light and discovered that she had fallen into a tiny cave. And right next to her, in the center of the cave, was something that was covered in several layers of worn-out blankets. "There's something down here, Mark, James. I want you to pull it out once I tie it to the rope." "All right," they said. The boys removed the item, untied it, and then allowed the rope's free end to fall back into the cave. Mark's father lifted Sally over his head so she could crawl out of the cave because it wasn't too deep. Then, after grabbing the rope, he managed to jump just enough to grab the gap and pull himself out. Let's return to my home for some hot tea. We'll check to see what treasure Sally unearthed once I phone your parents to ease their concerns. He spoke. They sipped their tea and started unwrapping the prize when they arrived at Mark's residence. Old blankets and layers of fabric were painstakingly removed to reveal a wooden box. They opened it cautiously while gazing in awe. Sally said, "Oh my," in shock. "I don't think what I'm seeing is real." The boys and Mark's dad just stood there and stared. There were jewels in the package of every color imaginable. All different sizes and shapes of diamonds, rubies, sapphires, and emeralds were present. They could make out a number of gold coins and pearl strands mingled together. The boys shouted, "We're rich!" Mark's father said, "Not quite. I don't think you should make any plans to spend any of it until we learn more, since someone might have lost it. Plus, Sally discovered it." Sally smiled and replied, "I'll share it." "That's excellent, Sally," Mark's father said, "but contacting the authorities is the appropriate course of action." The four of them drove to the police station the following day with Sally's mother, told what had occurred, and handed up the treasure for the officers to keep while they looked into the matter. Even the double-dipped ice cream cones Mark's father purchased them didn't cheer them up as they left the police station. They returned in silence. The police remained silent for a number of weeks. Then Mark's father contacted James, Sally, and their parents one evening. He added, "I believe you ought to come over right away. The police just called. Unfortunately, there is some bad news regarding the treasure. When you arrive, the cops will go over everything with you." James and Sally kept to themselves during the drive to Mark's residence. Even though it was likely gone, Sally believed that the treasure belonged to someone else because it was bad news, and not to her. She muttered, "Whatever happened to finders keepers?" Her mother questioned, "What did you say, Sally?" "Nothing. Oh," Sally answered. She sighed deeply and loudly, filling the entire vehicle. The cops had the treasure box waiting for them when they got to Mark's house. The captain welcomed her and said, "Sally, this is yours," as she entered. "Although your parents must sign a few documents, the box and its contents are yours." Sally, Mark, and James danced around the room while yelling with pleasure. Sally then inquired, "What is the bad news?" The skipper said while grinning. "The treasure is more valuable than you could have ever imagined, yet with tremendous wealth comes enormous responsibility." Although Sally wasn't really sure what the captain was talking about at the time, it didn't really matter. "Are you going to share?" Mark questioned. "Naturally," Sally replied. "I could have stayed there if you and James hadn't helped me." A few days later, Sally invited everyone to her home. "After the treasure is sold, I have decided what to do with the money," she stated. "I'm giving 1/6 to our parents, 1/6 to Mark's parents, 1/6 to Mark, 1/6 to James, and 1/6 to myself." Mark excitedly announced, "There is an extra 1/6. He was well knowledgeable about Sally's computations and enjoyed maths. "No, there isn't," Sally retorted. "Is too," James remarked. Sally responded, "Is not," in a furious tone. "This is why there isn't an additional 1/6, Mark was about to say when Sally interrupted. "I'm giving it to the neighborhood charity so that it will benefit the less fortunate and those in need." It was a kind and responsible thing to do, according to her parents, who raised her. They were really proud of her and were confident that she grasped what the captain had been trying to convey when he handed the treasure over to her just a few days earlier.